the Interesting Conversations with Interesting People podcast series with author Nigel Beckles.
Welcome to the podcast.
Please like the podcast and subscribe to this channel. Thank you. The very best way to promote your podcasts. Podpage makes it easy to create a podcast website with just a few clicks. Every page is optimized to be found on Google and it stays up to date forever. For more information, visit podpage.com. The future of podcast promotion.
Have you experienced several failed relationships or been through a divorce? How can you avoid making the same mistakes again? How to avoid making the big relationship mistakes is out now.
Hi, my name is Nigel Beckles. My new book is packed with practical and common sense strategies that you can use to make better relationship choices.
Now you can discover the dangerous myths about love. If your relationship expectations are realistic, why you could be falling in love for all the wrong reasons.
How to avoid making the big relationship mistakes. It's a book that could change your life.
Available from amazon.co.uk. Kindle version also available.
Author Queen P. When the Mood is Right, a poetry journey, mood swings, and when the mood is right, a rebirth. Books available on Amazon and all good bookstores.
You have entered into the royal affair. The royal affair. The royal affair. Hi, I'm Queen P, author of When the Mood is Right, a poetry journey, and mood swings. Please join me by tuning into my poetry podcast, The Royal Affair, on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, Google, and all other similar platforms. I'm hoping that this podcast will motivate you, inspire you, uplift you, and make you think about where you are in life, as well as seeing how far you have grown throughout your life's journey. You can also listen to the podcast on the Helium Radio Network on Saturdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So grab yourself a nice beverage that's soothing to your palate. Dim the lights, sit back, relax, and breathe. Then enter into the royal affair with me, Queen P. Come and explore with me. Let's take this journey together. Peace and blessings. And please, spread love. You have entered into the royal affair.
Join Queen P for the Royal Affair Poetry Podcast.
Get ready for takeoff.
Welcome back to my Interesting Conversations with Interesting People podcast series. My guest for this episode is an English literature teacher and also an author, Leah Bailey. Hi Leah, welcome to my podcast series. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So where do you live at the moment?
At the moment, I'm living in Wimbledon.
Oh, so did you grow up there?
Oh, I really didn't know. I grew up in the States.
Oh, what part of the States?
Just outside Philadelphia. I grew up in a small kind of town inside a town. It's about an hour north of Philly called Ivyland. And I moved over to England about 2003.
So why did you decide to move to the UK?
Well, initially for study. And then I married a Brit. And after that stopped, I was already teaching and I decided to stay because I love teaching English and living over here.
Well, I understand you write poetry. When did you become interested in writing poetry?
I've always been interested in writing. I've always been a reader. I love fairy tales. I love stories and characters and all kinds of imaginative creation. I used to write poetry as a teenager just as a means of expressing myself and getting my feelings and emotions down on the page and dealing with them, kind of a therapy, well-being sort of idea. I never really stopped. So I've been writing poetry as long as I can remember, and fiction, etc.
Well, you currently have 2 published books of poetry.
Mm-hmm.
What is your first book called and when was it published?
My first book is called Between Hindsight and Foresight, and it's a collection of my best work from the time I was 14 all the way up until 2019. And it was published during lockdown, May 2020.
Oh, quite recently then. So your second book, what is that called and what kind of poems are included?
Chasing Apollo is the name of the second book, and it's a little different than the first one. The first one is a collection of a variety of styles and topics and emotions. The second book, Chasing Apollo, I wrote after I did my last international travel trip to Italy, to Rome in 2020, just before all the world went crazy. So the entire basis of Chasing Apollo is a kind of journalistic poem. It follows my holiday. The main poem is 187 verses long, and it should feel like you're on my trip with me, because it's illustrated with photos that were turned into paintings to go along with the verses. And there's 5 or 6 smaller poems in there, but the whole book should kind of feel like you're in Rome with me.
You've also worked on a couple of anthologies. What are they called and what type of subjects do they explore?
Okay, so the first anthology that my work appears in is called The Spirit of Fire and Dust. And it's a collection of poems from poets that took part in an online open mic. They used to do, before the pandemic, a live open mic up in Coventry called Fire and Dust. And they went online, like so many others, during that time. And they put together an anthology, offered a chance for poets that came to the online Fire and Dust to write a poem based on the spirit of it. And so The Spirit of Fire and Dust is an anthology of those poems by poets who went into this global online mic phenomenon. The second anthology that I'm part of is called Life Outta Lockdown. And it's actually a second anthology in the series, but I was only involved in the second one, called Life Outta Lockdown, as part of a community Zoom. There is an absolutely brilliant lady named Leah Bailey, who puts together these networks of people helping each other out and bringing each other new ideas and new projects. And one of their projects was to write down and chronicle the experience of lockdown. They wrote a book called Life in a Lockdown in 2020. And then this new anthology is going to be released on April 9th and contains 23, I think, different authors and their experience with lockdown. I was fortunate enough to be one of them.
Well, I actually have a copy of Life in a Lockdown, and it makes for very interesting reading. So, Leah, what are your plans for the future?
I continue to write on the regular. I have a weekly writing session in one of my favorite places in Wimbledon, and I am a full-time English literature teacher. So I also try and practice what I preach, or preach what I practice, however you want to put it. But my plans for the future include a release of a third collection of poetry called Coffee and Paper Cuts, which should be out sometime this summer.
So, Leah, how can people contact you?
I have a Facebook page called Works of Leah the Dreamer. I have a YouTube channel which tells you the stories behind my poems. Again, Leah the Dreamer, and the same kind of moniker on Twitter and Instagram, all of which have message facilities that you can contact me on.
Leah in Wimbledon, UK, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Please follow author Nigel Beckles' podcasts on Anchor, Amazon Audible, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms. Thanks.